Hi everybody. I'm on the interstate and my hands are not on the wheel because I am using Super Cruise in this 2023 Cadillac CT5. I have the Super Cruise 2 package on this car, and that includes the ability to do what I'm doing right now, which is drive hands-free. And it includes auto lane change. Ooh, and it just aborted its own lane change. So what is this test? This is a Super Cruise test, and I'm deliberately doing it right around rush hour. I'm not right in the middle of a big metropolitan area. I'm kind of in the outskirts, but it's still plenty busy enough in terms of traffic. So we're gonna get a sense of what driving with Super Cruise is like in rush hour traffic. As you can see, I have not put my hands on the steering wheel yet. The sensor knows, the sensor right down there, knows that I am paying attention to the road, and the sensor also knows that I have the cruise set to 75 miles an hour. So we're just gonna get a sense of what being and look at that. It just did a lane change for us because it knows that we want to go faster than the traffic ahead. The middle lane is wanting to go. So it, on its own, changed lanes for us. Interesting trick. This lane's not going to last all that much longer. So it'd be interesting to see what the car does. Anyway, the point of this test is to just get a sense of what living with Super Cruise is like. So we're going to go on the interstate for a little while during rush hour and find out. Okay, traffic is slowing slightly, and here are the first signs saying, hey, this lane is about to end. So I'm not going to do anything unless I have to. We're going to see how the car handles it. Oh, and now this truck is brushing into my lane. Ooh, the truck pushed into my lane right at the last minute. Wow, interesting. So now the system is slowing way down because the system up. Super Cruise was disengaged. Super Cruise did not like the fact that the lane was ending, so I had to take over. So there's one lesson learned. If a lane disappears, there's a good chance you're gonna have to take over. There was also a pickup truck right before the lane was ending that was swerving around a bit, and that probably didn't help. So anyway, Super Cruise is back on, and as far as I know, we're gonna have these two lanes for the next little while. So I'm gonna take my hands off the wheel again and see how it copes. The other interesting thing about Super Cruise, because it's an automated system and inherently wants to be safe, that does mean that you're gonna have a little bit more of a gap than some people that might be a little bit rushed to get home from work are willing to accept. So I have a suspicion that a few people are gonna try to tuck in between me and the car in front. So we'll see how that part goes. So the Super Cruise system will change lanes on its own, but you can also, with the turn signal, do a lane change on demand. And just as I was describing that, the computer decided on its own to do its own lane change. How about that? But it is true. You can do what's called a lane change on demand, where you initiate the lane change by turning on the turn signal, but otherwise the car does the rest. Now we're in another interesting circumstance here where there is a car in front, but it's still in our blind spot and we're approaching a slower semi-truck. So I think the system's gonna be pretty passive. So we're gonna have to wait for that car to pass again and then find another gap before we get another automatic lane change. And it might be a moment. All right, I'm gonna ask for, oh, nope, I don't have to. It's gonna do a lane change on, oh. So here's where Super Cruise is interesting. You're gonna need some patience. I'm actually gonna take over and get the lane change done because there's a gap, but I don't think it was big enough for the computer to recognize it. I think by the time the computer recognized it and went through its changes, the gap would have closed. You do inherently have to be a bit on the patient side when you're using Super Cruise. So maybe afternoon rush hour isn't the best time for it. But at the same time, I've been largely hands-free here. Cheers. So you can see there's this green bar on the steering wheel. That's letting me know that Super Cruise is active and happy. There's also a green steering wheel indicator up there. And I do have the driver assistance page right there, so you can see what the car sees as traffic around it. And then there's two green lines on either side of the lane to show that we're in the center of the lane, or at least close enough. And the system does have a myriad of sensors to get a good understanding of where the car is, as well as a very accurate map of this chunk of interstate. That is a big part of Super Cruise. It knows this portion of the interstate already really well. And then all the sensors and everything else are giving it a sense of the traffic that's on the interstate. So I had my eyes away from the sensor for just a few seconds to grab my drink, and the steering wheel started blinking at me. So if I'm going to do it again on purpose, yep, there it goes. So if your eyes are away from this sensor right here for more than a few seconds, you're going to start getting indications that it's not happy. A big part of Super Cruise is that you're also paying attention. So it's really fascinating to see how this system monitors all the traffic around it, but also monitors you to make sure that you're still alert. So now that traffic has calmed down just a tiny little bit, I'm getting the advantages of Super Cruise just a little bit more. I must admit, it is nice to have this level of driving aids. If you're going to have automatic emergency braking and lane centering and adaptive cruise control, it's nice to be able to take advantage of it. And it's like, well, I'd like to have my hands free in that case. So I have a car approaching me pretty aggressively from behind. I think it's going to want to get ahead of me, but it is still fairly heavy traffic. We'll see if Super Cruise changes lanes, and if it does, what the car next to me will do. Nope, not enough time. So the car next to me has already gotten over and is passing me on the right there now. So we just had a gap, and we just had the car cut in to that gap. So we did have to slow down a little bit to get our gap back to, it's under a second, that gap, but I don't know how much precisely. So it's fascinating to me that Super Cruise was pretty quick to change lanes into the faster lane, but it is a little bit more hesitant, it seems, to auto change back into the slower lane. So if you want to be very proactive about not staying in the left lane when you're not passing, you might have to do a little bit more of that on your own. That's a little bit of an unknown though, because we are definitely still passing people on a regular basis because of this heavy traffic. It's just how quickly can the sensors recognize that there's a gap versus how quickly you can recognize there's a gap. So I am now going the requested 75 miles an hour, and I am in the left lane passing semi-trucks, but definitely going slower than the car-based traffic in general. So were there not semi-trucks here on a regular basis, I would be pretty eager to get into the right lane. But fortunately, there's no one behind me either right now, so I'm not holding anybody up. It doesn't take more than a few seconds. If you're not paying attention to the road, this sensor knows that, and it knows that quickly. So we have a gap, and the system is auto lane changing us over pretty quickly into the right lane. I must say that I'm pretty happy with that. So it seemed a little hesitant to get back over to the right lane, but there was traffic coming, there was slower traffic coming. As long as it's a gap that's big enough that it sees, it will get itself over into the slower lane. That's pretty impressive. I have done remarkably little driving here and made remarkably few decisions, considering that I am driving on the interstate right now during rush hour. It's pretty impressive how many decisions Super Cruise has made, and the vast majority of them have been the correct ones. Ooh, now we're driving right into the sun. Now, driving into the sun did not have any ill effect on these sensors at all. Nothing here got confused or concerned or flashed at me or did anything weird, so that is nice, because direct sunlight could be overpowering in a lot of circumstances, but this system held on just fine. Okay, so now we're coming up on another interesting circumstance. We have a semi-truck passing another semi-truck, so the traffic ahead is going a lot slower than us, but it's actually the left lane that we're going to catch before we catch the right lane. So we'll see how the system interacts to that. Are we going to stay in the right lane and wait until all the traffic in the left passes, or are we also going to get into the left lane proactively? Me, as a driver on my own, I would get in the left lane proactively earlier because I know that that is long-term the shortest route. Yep, and the system's doing this. Oh, aborted. And the system is looking for a gap, but the gap's not quite big enough. All right, well, I'm going to request a lane change. And that did it. So if you request a lane change by turning on your turn signal and the gap is there and you can see it, the car does seem to recognize it. But if it has to decide to do a lane change on its own, it seems like it's going to need a little bit more of a gap, a little bit more of a cushion for it to make that lane change. This is really interesting technology. I am driving in rush hour traffic on the interstate and I'm barely touching the steering wheel. And a couple times that I did, I didn't have to. I just decided to. And I have to say, stress has been quite low. The system is doing everything safely and appropriately. And this is really where we start getting some of the benefits of all these driving aids if you're a driver enthusiast. To have these circumstances where you can kind of take a little bit more of a passive approach. I'm definitely still paying attention, but I'm not nearly as stressed about finding gaps, looking for them and all those things, because the computer is doing all that and it's doing it well. So yeah, Super Cruise, especially this enhanced Super Cruise with auto lane change, is a really, really nice feature. But again, you do have to be a bit on the patient side.